I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. This is another big night for High Point, I think. Another turning point, another crossroads. What other cliches I can think of? But I've always been kind of irritated with when somebody says an opportunity presented itself, or an opportunity arose. Kind of like you get visions of like the Lady of the Lake lifting Excalibur out of the water, but to me, opportunities never arise; they were always there. It's just a question of whether you can see the opportunity and whether you have the courage and the wherewithal to go out and seize that opportunity. We are currently in High Point in a process of seizing a great opportunity in our downtown, and that's if you want to go in the other room and look out the window, you can see BB&T Point from here. If the Rockers are in town, you can go see a game. The Outfields project is getting ready to begin. Great opportunity with Plant 7 and the whole HB 365 effort. The Congdon Event Center is on the way. The Cobain Children's Museum is on the way. And all of this is a result of kind of a historic synthesis of cooperation between the city of High Point, High Point University, High Point's business community, the philanthropy community, and private developers. High Point is truly a great place where great people make great things happen. And even though we've had successes and we have more to come, we got to plan for our successes, and we have to continue to look for new opportunities and seize those opportunities. Now, there was a time in High Point where unless you were barefooted and if you wore socks, there's a pretty good chance those socks were made in High Point. And unless you sat on the floor your whole life, the chair you were sitting on and the table you were eating at and the bed you were laying in was probably made in High Point. The southwest part of High Point was once the living and breathing economic engine of our city, and not just our city, but of whole industries. And while the thriving factories and the jobs that were once there and once defined our city are no longer there, there is a great opportunity there. And tonight we are here to talk about that great opportunity. Throughout America, there is currently a revolution in what is known as small-scale manufacturing and place-based economic development. One would say that our catalyst project with the stadium is place-based economic development. In February of this year, a team of development experts from a nonprofit called Smart Growth America, in partnership with a company called Recast City, a company that harnesses community assets to build energy and strengthen local economies, came to High Point to meet with different stakeholders about small-scale manufacturing in High Point. The team put together a report and recommendations to help us make strategic decisions to enhance small-scale manufacturing and improve economic revitalization. We have the opportunity to remake High Point Southwest into a vibrant hub of activity and rediscover our manufacturing roots. I'd like now to introduce Ilana Preuss. Ilana is the founder of Recast City and works with real estate developers, city, and other civic leaders to integrate manufacturing space for small-scale manufacturers and producers into redevelopment projects and place-based economic development. Ilana is passionate about High Point, and she is passionate about making great places and sees that small-scale manufacturers are a missing piece in today's mixed-use development and commercial property repositioning. So please join me in welcoming Ilana Preuss with Recast City to share the recommendations from the Smart Growth America Technical Assistance Team.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'm going to wander. I hope you guys don't mind. You guys can hear me in the back, right? No one ever said I was the quiet one in the room. So you guys just let me know. Thank you, Mayor. It is a thrill to be back here. What the mayor glossed over was that we actually spent a whole bunch of months working together before we got to town in February. And I really had the pleasure of meeting, in fact, many of you, but not all of you, when we were in town back in February. And what I learned, and you alluded to this, is that High Point is a city of people who believe in the opportunity to create things, and who believe that it is something that this city can do not only again, but more of. and that it is really at the heart and soul of High Point. And so we were here under a grant from the U.S. Economic Development Administration that went to the nonprofit Smart Growth America, who hired me. It's like the cat that bit the dog. My firm, Recast City, this is all I do, is I work with cities and real estate developers, and I say, this is this missing piece. It's here somewhere. Let's uncover it and figure out how we pull it back in. And we had this amazing opportunity when we were here to meet with people and to learn about different spaces, including some of the people who are here, their spaces. And I just had a wonderful time getting to know this city and the people who are of this city. And what we realized, and this is true everywhere, this is not just you guys, but there are a lot of communities facing a lot of challenges. And I know this comes as no shock to you. And I'm not going to spend today going into the litany of problems that we're facing in our communities today, but we have to think about what we do in our communities as a way to address those problems. And not just put on our blinders and say, I'm going to keep doing the same thing I always did before and expect some different outcome in my community. And you guys have really taken off your blinders and really started to reinvest in the city and in the core city in particular as a way to say, you know what, we're proud of this city. And that's what people see on the outside, and I hope you guys know that. When a city reinvests in its own center, everybody else looks at that city and says, oh, somebody believes in that place. Somebody's proud of that place. And that's a key piece for us to remember. Because people pick their city first these days, and then find a job or a business. And so the competition is really all about place. Is it a place that people can gather? Is it a place that people feel included? Is there something beautiful about that place, the buildings, the natural environment? Those are the three pieces that we know, in fact, are what tie people to a community. There's a great Gallup study that they did a bunch of years ago. And so then we think about, well, what do we want to do next to support High Point? Well, it's about the place, so reinvesting in the core city, creating a place that people feel included, they can gather, where people can have businesses. And the reason that I focus on small scale manufacturing, and I call them hidden gems, is because they start fulfilling a number of our needs in terms of community redevelopment in a way that really nothing else does. Small-scale manufacturing businesses, and when I talk about small-scale manufacturing businesses, I just want to clarify, this is any business that makes a tangible good. If I can hold it in my hand, you're making a product, right? And a product can be made by one person, or it can be, we know, can be made by thousands of people. Doesn't matter material, I'm material agnostic. So it can be hot sauce, handbags, or hardware. It's my new line. And, but when we talk about small-scale manufacturing, I'm really talking about businesses that are about 1 to 20 people, because they fit into the fabric of our neighborhoods, into the fabric of our city, and certainly into the fabric of the Southwest quadrant. And so these businesses actually give people a reason to gather. So you think about holiday markets, right? Artisan markets. You come out because you want to see the small products that people are making. There's a chocolate shop in Seattle, Theo. Theo Chocolates, if anybody has ever bought their chocolate, they're in Whole Foods. You can go on a tour of their facility in Seattle. Because people, it's an amenity, right? It's an amenity to get to go see product being made. And I think a lot of cities where production and manufacturing were always part of the place forget that it's actually a cool factor right now to get to see things being made, and it gives people that reason to gather. It also gives us a great opportunity to build a more inclusive community of business owners. When I talk about business owners in a community, and the city staff probably knows this better than anybody, I say find me a community of business owners to interview, because we do one-on-one interviews with business owners when we come to town, that represents the demographic diversity of your community. Now, the reality is in a lot of communities, the relationships aren't necessarily there at the beginning, but they are at the end, hopefully, because part of what we want to do is build that part of the economy in a completely inclusive way. There's one nonprofit real estate development company in Brooklyn. They have about 500,000 square feet. They did a survey of their small scale manufacturers that are in their space. 40% of their business owners do not have a college or an advanced degree. So when we're talking about how are we looking at wealth building within our community in a way that is very accessible, small scale manufacturing has to be a part of that conversation. They also fill storefronts. So most producers these days, when we're talking about small producers, they're not noisy, they're quiet, they're clean, they're good neighbors. And you can look in the storefront window, and people have seen me do this, squish your nose up against the window and try to see what's being made in there. Or they might have a space where it's both production and retail in the same space. This lovely woman, to the left of the picture, is this huge cauldron that she stirs her soap in and pours into molds. And then just to that space that you can see is where she puts them all out and sells them. Right? This is production and retail and attracts foot traffic. And one of the amazing things about this from a real estate perspective is that she's not dependent on foot traffic for all of her revenue to pay for her lease. She can sell online, she can sell wholesale, and all of a sudden we're looking at much more viable businesses that can afford a lease, that can afford to be in a space. They also increase our property values. If we think about all of the vacant space in the Southwest Quadrant or vacant storefronts in a specific corridor, right? These businesses can go in and fill a storefront, help build that foot traffic, help build that security of being in a space, even though they're not dependent on the foot traffic, and obviously start impacting property values because people see a draw to that place. This is Zeke's Coffee. It's in DC. They do all of their coffee roasting in the back. They have a coffee shop up front, and they do all their wholesale distribution from the basement ground floor access. Multiple revenue sources in one space. And then they have this amazing ability to attract more business owners. And I don't want to understate this in any way. When you do good for your small business owners, particularly producers, but small business in general, they spread the word for you. They're the most amazing recruitment you've ever seen because there are so few places that are really comprehensively taking care of small scale manufacturing business owners that when you really do make a concerted effort and say, you guys are important to us, we want you here, that it gets known. Knoxville, Tennessee is a great example of that. The mayor put a stake in the ground and said, we want you here, we will have a mayor's maker council, we will support you, we will provide funding for a nonprofit that supports you, which is the Knoxville Entrepreneur Center, which supports all different kinds of entrepreneurs in the community. The Urban League is also involved, and they have an annual summit. And now they have a website and all sorts of great stuff. But it makes a big difference, and people know that Knoxville is a great place to be if you're a small scale producer. So what does all of this mean for High Point? And I just wanted to sort of set that stage a little bit in terms of what we're talking about for businesses and why. Why do we care about this business type? And that's what I wanted to be sure about, to clarify. So when we came to town in February, we interviewed business owners, service providers, city staff, developers. I'm missing many categories, I'm sure. And we asked questions. We asked questions about what works about being here? What are the assets? Okay, well, what doesn't really work about being here? What are the challenges? And all of that we take in, and I'm about to tell you about the assets and challenges, and I just want to be clear, this is all based on what we heard from people. None of this comes out of me. And then based on all of those assets and challenges, we make a set of recommendations. The recommendations are from Smart Growth America and Recast City back to you guys, to then be able to pick from a set of very concrete actions. None of them are, big, lofty concepts. They're all very concrete. They've all been done somewhere else. And you get to pick and say, yes, these are really important to us. We want to do these this year and these next year. And then my hope is that you actually do all of that. So let's talk about what does it mean? So there are a whole bunch of assets that you guys have going for you. And I'm not gonna go through all of them. You can take a look at the list. But I think it's important to note that you have a lot of assets. right? And you want to build on these assets. And some of them are really thinking about this historic manufacturing base that you do have. And it's not just historic, it's now. You have a lot of small businesses in your city making stuff. A lot of them obviously in furnishings, but not only. This is in textiles, right? There are people making food products. There are lots of different kinds of producers in this city, and they're choosing to do it here. And that's a wonderful asset to build on. You also have amazing higher education opportunities to train people into these sectors, to fill the gaps. Everywhere I go, everyone's talking about the skills gap. You guys are already creating programs that are training people to fill the jobs in some of those growing small manufacturing businesses. And you have a phenomenal building stock. Your the older industrial buildings in this neighborhood, in the southwest quadrant, are beautiful. And I happen to be the person who drives around or walks around staring at the old buildings out the window, hopefully not driving off the road. And they're beautiful. I mean, they really are. Many of them are close to the street, which is what you would want in an urban environment. They still have their walls, which is a great asset. And many of them are just these great historic brick industrial buildings, which are an amazing asset. And a lot of them obviously are not the size that large manufacturers want anymore, but they're perfect if rehabbed in the most basic way for small scale manufacturers to be able to subdivide a space. Think co-work for small scale manufacturers. There are also a lot of challenges, and I don't understate challenges ever, as anyone who's sat with me in any of these meetings before knows. There is no there. Here in this area, there's no there. You don't know you're in a district, you don't know in a place that they want people. You guys are doing that for downtown now, and that's an enormously important thing to do first. But it's important to get ahead of this area and say, this is what our vision is. This is what we want it to become. Both from a design, placemaking, how do you want it to feel as you walk down the street, but also from an economic development standpoint. What kind of businesses, how do we want to attract them? There's also a lot of divisions in this city, and it's important to be super clear about it. There's income divisions, there's racial divisions, there's divisions between the people who grew up in High Point and have known everybody and their generations since birth, and people who are new to town. And it's important to say we know that they're there, and part of what we can do in our programming or in the creation of space is start addressing some of those divisions. And then there's gaps in the support for small scale manufacturers as well. The lack of vision for the southwest quadrant. What do you want it to feel like? How do you want it to approach the street? What kind of businesses should be there? And then the gaps for small scale manufacturers or small product businesses of different kinds. You have the most amazing mentors in the whole world in your city for product businesses. How do you start connecting those dots? And for people who aren't in furnishings, but might be in food or in some other line, who are the mentors you need to track down for them? How do you connect them up with people in other cities or bring up people from other cities who could be mentors for them so that they have that kind of help when they are working to grow? And mentors are a hugely important piece for scaling businesses. So, moral of the story is these production businesses are really key to your economy and to the growth of the city. It's always been a part of who you've been as High Point. Unfortunately, on a national stage, 30 years ago, production businesses didn't have the greatest cachet, and that's changing in a really big way. I sit through meeting after meeting or article after article where people are talking about how the businesses doing production are growing, the skills that are needed are higher and higher tech, and there is very little training going on to get people there. And so a place like you guys that already knows about manufacturing, that already has some of the training programs going, and has mentors and a lot of the infrastructure already in place, you guys can draw more and more of that together in High Point. So how do we do it? I'm gonna just go through a couple of top line the recommendations. The city is releasing the report, sharing the report in some way, and yes, they are. And you can go into the details. You can look at the details there. But I just want to highlight a couple of them. There's 5 different major areas of recommendation. that we have for the city. And I'm going to just talk through them very briefly. One is to have a comprehensive vision for the area. So we know from the real estate development community, if you say go this direction, developers are very happy to build in this direction as long as it pencils, right? So looking at this quadrant as an area for small-scale manufacturing, potentially as an industrial Main Street area to say, bless you, we want small-scale manufacturing, we want light industrial businesses here, but we also want it to be comfortable for pedestrians to walk around here. Because maybe we'll end up with a mix of uses where on a Saturday, maybe we can walk around and see the stuff, or on a Friday afternoon, we walk around and see stuff being made. And that becomes a draw both for residents as well as for tourists once you start pulling it together, and not just over 2 weeks a year or 4 weeks a year. That could be a year-round amenity really for the community. Second, we recommend investing in an anchor space. And this is for a couple of reasons. One is, once this is wildly successful and becomes the hottest neighborhood in the city where people have businesses, we don't want the residents to be priced out of it. So if the city invests either directly or through a community development corporation or a public-private partnership, there's lots of ways to do it. But if the city invests in a property, then it can also make sure that there's affordable space for small-scale manufacturers who are getting started over the long haul as well. Or some other way to sort of help catalyze that the city believes in this market and wants to see this happen. Third is we recommend partnering with the nearby neighborhoods and the service providers to help more residents become entrepreneurs. The reality is that there's tons of skills that people have. People are baking stuff in their house, they're jamming stuff, making jams, they're sewing things, they're doing woodwork, they're doing all sorts of things at home that could be products that could be sold online as a second or third income for their household, or could become a full-fledged business. And there are programs that are, We Are Mortar is the one I highlight here. It's out of Cincinnati, and it's led by a crew of African-American guys who came together and said, we want to give back to the neighborhood, and went into the neighborhood, African-American neighborhood in Cincinnati that had been ignored for a really long time, and said, we're going to create an entrepreneurship program for this community to meet people where they are, answering all of their questions, no matter where it is, from soup to nuts. Going into a community and into a neighborhood and saying, we're going to meet you where you are and build capacity within the neighborhood makes an enormous difference for people's access to both the education as well as future wealth building within the community. Our fourth recommendation is to launch some kind of citywide programming to promote, train, and help scale these businesses. It doesn't have to be only led by the city. You guys obviously have an amazing network of the Small Business Center, the Chamber, the library, and many others, the community college, who are playing a role in supporting this business sector. But figuring out what are all the different parts of the continuum. There is no sort of 12-week boot camp. If you have an idea, is it actually a business? There's a great example out of Birmingham, Alabama, where they really take you through what's the reality of having a business? Is there a market for your product? And at the end of 12 weeks, you both know, do I really want to run a business? And B, is there a market for my business? And people at that point can decide yes or no. And they have people saying yes or no for all sorts of reasons, but it's so much better than people doing this for 5 years and having no idea what's going on. So we recommend that too. And then lastly, removing policy barriers and creating incentives for all sorts of interesting things that support business launch. And there's a lot of sort of mishmash of ideas in this section, but we do see demand for some kind of commercial shared kitchen in the area. I know there are ones in other cities, not that close or not that far away, but the commercial shared kitchen we have seen has really become an economic development catalyst in a lot of communities, because people can go from making that product at home to making that product in a health department or ag department approved space, and then they can sell it in wholesale at a local market or in a Whole Foods or online or at local fairs or at the market or in other ways once they have access to that commercial shared kitchen. And so we really see that as one of the key pieces and one of the key missing pieces for this area as well. And it's important to remember why we're doing this, right? It's because of the people who are here and the people who are already like you getting involved and sharing ideas, the buildings you guys are already renovating, the spaces you're already making happening, and the businesses that are already here. There's so much going on, which is why it's so exciting to me, to just help sort of point you in the direction of a set of additional steps you can take to just keep building on the momentum and building on the excitement that is already there. So the question then is, what's your first step? So that's all for the presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
Can you go back a couple steps to the recommendation slide?
Sure? Whoops.
That's it?
Yep.
Let's see. Can you give some more details about some of those 5?
Sure, but that's definitely what I would say. For each one of these, there's at least 3 to 7 specific recommendations, and I can take out my notes if you want more.
How about number 2?
Yeah. So one of the things that we've seen in a lot of other communities is that a community development corporation, a city, or through a public-private partnership, a building is purchased, sometimes using new market tax credits or using community development block grants in partnership, to set aside space for small-scale manufacturing. Not that everybody's using 100,000 square feet, but there's a great example in Philadelphia. It's a 120,000 square foot building, so it's a little bit bigger than anything we're talking about in this area, but it's subdivided for businesses that are using 500 square feet, and it's leased out. It's tenanted. It's 500 square feet up to 10,000 square feet that businesses can lease a space. It's like an office. It's not an office building. In their case, it's an old industrial building that's been rehabbed, and all of the electric and water is back up to code. So that's the kind of project that I'm talking about, both to establish the market, but also to create this anchor center for the neighborhood to say we want these businesses here.
Do you see some good candidates in the southwest quadrant for number 2?
I think there are a lot of buildings. We were here for 3 days, so I'm not going to pull out a specific building for you, but there are a lot of buildings there that I think would be phenomenal for this. And you could add different capacities to it. There's no makerspace in this city. A makerspace is something that's accessible to the public to come and use tools and take classes using different tools. The Forge in Greensboro, I think, is the closest one. So you could have that kind of partnership with the library. There's lots of different opportunities for that. Any other questions? Please.
Do you start on Main Street and work back?
Which one's Main Street?
South Main Street. Like, the beginning of your garden.
So you're kind of over here, but we're off of Main Street, really.
Yes, Main Street's probably right where you're here.
Right.
Not necessarily, because downtown's up here, right? If I'm getting my geography right.
The new downtown.
The new downtown.
And actually, it's the part that's more English, Martin Luther King, old, and Russell.
Gotcha.
And I think you could start on the side, you could start in the middle of it. I mean, what we've seen in other neighborhoods is that it really takes the first couple of people sticking their neck out, I mean it does, and saying this place is going to work. But the bones of this area are just so amazing. You have a pretty good grid of streets already. You have some great historic industrial buildings, and you have a bunch of developable space too. Not that those are necessarily the properties to go after. And you can do this great mix of what's going on. I don't know how much you guys talk about Asheville around here, but Asheville does a huge PR campaign in DC for summer tourists. They're on every third commercial in the spring is an Asheville commercial in DC. I don't really know why we're the target market. I've been to Asheville. I've been to the Arts District. It is this just painted, right? They don't have more buildings. They don't have more activity. They've just painted it and occupied it. And there's huge long swaths of empty space between the buildings. It's not I love Asheville, but like it doesn't take much of a jump to get to that, and then you can do so much better. Don't tell Asheville I said that.
It's true. Yeah, it's true.
It is. What other questions do you guys have?
We're gonna keep talking here for a few minutes, so.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We'll stay around.
Thank you.
Thank you.